Welcome back, everyone, to the John Rondi Show. Today's episode is going to be a bit different. The tonality is a little more serious than you're probably used to. We're talking about something known as weed-induced psychosis, something that has impacted my life personally. We have Laura Stacks coming on the show today. She unfortunately lost her son to weed-induced psychosis. And again, this is something that 5 years ago, I wouldn't have believed to be true, but it is very real and is definitely impacting the lives of a lot of young people in today's day and age. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. Hopefully it raises awareness. And if you're somebody that is struggling or know somebody that's struggling, do not hesitate to reach out and ask for help. Thank you for joining us today, and I'm excited and intrigued to hear more about your story and Johnny's story and raising awareness about something that, again, 5 years ago, or if I wasn't personally attached to something like this, I would have no clue about and would feel the way most outsiders feel, like it's just weed. And this whole weed-induced psychosis movement, there's no way I believe it. So I'll shut up for a bit. I'll let you share your story and Johnny's ambassadors, and then we'll dive right into it.
Okay, so you want me just to talk about okay. So we are like any normal family. I have 3 children, an older daughter, and Johnny, and then my youngest son James, who was 16 months younger than Johnny. And when Johnny was 14 years old, marijuana was legalized here in Colorado. So we were the first state, and he was at a 9th grade party where there was marijuana at the party, and all the boys wanted to try to get high, he told us. And so he hit it. And that was the beginning of 5 years of struggling with what very quickly became an addiction for my son. Mental hospital stays, 3 of them, doctors, treatments, programs, very expensive brain treatments. I mean, everything we could do to try to save him. And before this all happened, I mean, Johnny was just a normal, wonderful teenager. He was very involved in school. He ran cross country, track. He played the piano, the guitar. He was involved in his youth group at church. Wicked smart, perfect SAT score in math, 800 out of 800, 4.0 GPA, had a scholarship to Colorado State University, which he lost. And then he got a scholarship to the University of Northern Colorado, and he lost that scholarship too. And as he progressed in his use, right, going from just casual, we smoked it at a party on a weekend, which I have to admit, John, I said to myself when he told me he was smoking weed, I was like, what's the big deal? Like,
sure,
it's just weed. I used it when I was a kid. It didn't hurt me. And I had no idea what had happened to marijuana, to the potency of THC products, what had happened in the industry, what had happened to accessibility, to availability, and what had happened with our teens' brains. I had no concept that this strong THC could alter brain development. I knew nothing.
Right.
Nothing. So it's not like alarm bells went off in my head. I wasn't going, oh my gosh. I was just like, he's getting straight A's. It didn't seem to be hurting him. You kind of go, kids will be kids. It's really no big deal. But he started having these really strange thoughts. And at first it started with him kind of isolating himself. He started dropping out of things that used to give him so much joy. His friends started calling us saying, don't tell Johnny we're calling, but we're really kind of worried about him. And his use started to increase, right? It used to be just this fun thing, and then it was every weekend, and then it was every day, and then it was many times every day. Like, when he woke up, before class, after class, before lunch, after lunch, like he became so addicted to this that when he tried to stop, and he did, many times he successfully quit. He would just feel so bad
Right.
that he couldn't stop. And he would start up again, 2 or 3 months later. But then, like the summer before his senior year, things just really got weird. It was like an alien came and took him away and put a different child there. And this one was mean. And he would call me name. I mean, I was his person, right? Like, nobody loved him more. And he'd be like, F you. I mean, just horrible, horrible names. He was toxic. He was defiant. He wouldn't do chores. He'd hit his, pen right in front of me. He wouldn't go to school. He started dropping out. And then he started saying some very strange things. He would say that, like, his phone was listening to him, and that, his room was bugged, and that the university was actually an FBI base. And so we had no idea about any of this. And really nobody would believe me, and nobody would help me. And we finally, in a mental hospital, he was diagnosed with THC abuse severe. Now, they didn't really kind of call it cannabis-induced psychosis. But for the first time, a doctor told me, look, he didn't test positive for anything else. It's just weed. And he was given genetic tests, like, because we don't have mental illness in our family. People were like, oh, well, he was going to get schizophrenia. It's like, no, he didn't show any mental illness. It was all like secondary to his cannabis use.
Right.
And sadly, he came to us. He had just lost his second scholarship, and we were trying everything so hard. And he said, Mom, I want you to know you were right. And I said, about what? This was 3 days before he died. He said, you told me that marijuana would hurt my brain, and it's ruined my mind and my life. And I'm so sorry, Mama. I love you. And 3 days later, he took his life, and we found a journal that he had written in where he was writing, the mob is after me again. And so we obviously will never know what really happened. But we think he was having some kind of psychotic break. And we were, of course, it was COVID, right? Right after he died. So we were alone and grieving. And I was basically in a fetal position for 6 months, and started to do a lot of writing, because I did some writing before in my previous life, and research, and started talking to doctors and looking at research, and found Sir Robin Murray in the UK, who's now on our scientific advisory board. And he was the one who really first explained about cannabis-induced psychosis, that they was well known in the UK, but that nobody was talking about here in the US because, reefer madness, right? And they right. Of course, want people to be addicted to it to feed this marijuana industry.
Sure.
So we started a nonprofit. I thought, you know what? This stuff took my child, and I am going to do everything that I can in my power to keep it from taking others. And I wrote a book during COVID about Johnny, 300 pages, his autobiography, The Dangerous Truth About Today's Marijuana. And I started finding other parents who went through what I went through. And it started with just 10 of us, right? Where they were like, oh my gosh, I've never heard of any of this happening to anybody else. And I'm so glad I found you. They would find my book, they would find my blog, our nonprofit. And slowly, we started finding people. And I started doing assemblies at school and parent nights, and more parents heard. And long story short, sadly, John, we have over 2,100 parents right now whose children are in cannabis-induced psychosis. And our board, our doctors estimate in the US right now, they estimate 1.1 million teens currently have cannabis-induced psychosis in the United States.
Wow.
So it is really kind of this silent epidemic that nobody understands, nobody believes, nobody talks about. But when you do talk to someone about it, they go, oh yeah, actually, my brother's daughter, and everyone seems to have a story of someone experiencing this in their family.
Yeah. At least some sort of connection. And by the way, again, I'm terribly sorry for your loss, but it's amazing, first of all, how much clarity you can speak with about this stuff, and that you truly are a pioneer in what, like, who knows, like in 5-10 years, if we're like, oh my God, we were letting people smoke this stuff. Like how was this even possible? And I'm just like, I have so many questions about your journey and what you've kind of found out and discovered. And I guess my first one is like, are there any patterns with who is impacted by this? Because the people that I've, and again, I mentioned I have a personal tie to this, not myself, but people that I know. And it seems like it's males around that age. Are you noticing the same thing with the parents you're speaking to?
Yes. Well, both quantitatively with research and subjectively, yes, it is mostly males. We have, I would say 95% of the parents in our group, it's the son. And there are some reasons for that, mostly because at the age that young people are interested in experimenting with substances, and there's a lot of peer pressure to fit in and it's fun and everybody's using it, that's the time when the female brain is a little more developed.
Got it. Okay.
So the males seem to have a greater impact, especially during puberty. It is a critical time of brain development, 13 through 16, 17, where the prefrontal cortex, when THC binds to those receptors, alters the formation of those neural pathways and has a profound impact on thinning in the prefrontal cortex. Literally, by volume, 30% less in the young people who use more, and it's more pronounced in males. Canada just came out with a landmark study. Ontario, Canada, 12 million people, just came out in September of last year. If you are a young man, ages 14 to 18, and you show up in an emergency room in Ontario, Canada, with cannabis-induced psychosis, in 3 years, 41.3% of them will be diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Now, weed-induced schizophrenia or just schizophrenia?
With cannabis-induced psychosis. If you show up in an emergency room, you're having an episode of cannabis-induced psychosis, in 3 years, 41.3% of them cannot go back. They don't go back to baseline. Their brains do not heal. They now are in a full-blown schizophrenia. Now, they call it schizophrenia because that's what it resembles. The symptoms are
okay.
Separate diagnostic code. I think there will be, to your point, in 10 years, because the schizophrenia, like classic schizophrenia, if you were going to get it anyway, genetically, that looks different, that presents different, that responds different. The ages are different, for when you get this kind of quasi-schizoaffective disorder with cannabis-induced psychosis that seems to be marked more by like delusional thinking, a lot of suspicion. There's some common patterns. It's a lot of people are after me. People are talking about me. A
lot of paranoia.
The FBI is after me. I can talk to plants. I know God. Like it's very similar when you start hearing the stories of a lot of these people who have these episodes. So it's tremendously dangerous. It's I think in Denmark, they found that 30% of their young men ages 18 through 24 who had schizophrenia would not have had it had they not used THC when they were young men, but it was only 4% for young women.
And again, I have no clue why, but I think it's so intriguing that the male brain, and like you said, maybe it's more of like a malleable thing where it's just they're younger and they mature a little bit older.
Yeah.
But it seems like this isn't necessarily just a trigger for what would have been schizophrenia anyway. It's like it's causing these schizophrenic like symptoms.
We know now it's because there was always that like chicken egg thing.
Right, correct.
Well, they were mentally ill anyway, and they were using weed to self-medicate. It's like,
right, and it's just presenting
my son just wanted to get high. Okay, it was a party drug because it's easier to get weed than it is to get alcohol. I mean, here you only have to be 18 to get a med card in most states, and you pay your $300 and say you got a hangnail. Oh, you need a med card, and they, it's so simple to get, and alcohol is hard to get. At least here, Colorado, it's locked down. Yeah. And we know there's a new study out of the UK that showed there is a different pathway of the route to psychosis through cannabis use versus genetic. Now, if you have genetics for schizophrenia, it's even more important, right, that you don't use it all and abstain. But what we know is that many of these psychoses are secondary to the cannabis use. It's not like, they were mentally ill anyway, and they used more cannabis.
Got it.
Because they were mentally ill. No. So now we know, even without a genetic predisposition to THC, that using these products at a young age, high frequency, high potency, can induce permanent cannabis-induced psychosis.
Got it. And I think that's kind of why, like you're saying, it's sort of important that there is eventually a difference in what we diagnose people with, right? Like, maybe we're calling it schizophrenia because it appears and looks like this, but it could be something completely separate. Is there a test, a brain scan you can do to determine if somebody's susceptible to something like?
I mean, gosh, they would love, they're working on all kinds of things. They do know that out of all the drugs, there is a higher conversion of a permanent psychosis from cannabis than from any other drug. I'm talking meth, and amphetamines. And there are some tests. There's like the Genomine, which is one Johnny took, and there are some gene clusters that you can look at, COMT, ATK1. There's if you have Val, certain variants, which Johnny did not have, he had Val-Met. So there are some limited tests, but schizophrenia is not just this one gene, right? It's very complicated and very different pathways that we're just now really understanding how that CB1 receptor and that entire endocannabinoid system in brain development is altered by THC in that receptor. And so there's glutamate is involved, different neurotransmitters, so it's quite complicated.
Right.
So long story short, we don't know who is susceptible. And to be very clear, a lot of teens smoke weed without a problem.
Right.
But a lot of them still are like, every other month I hit a joint at a party. Okay, well that's different than I'm hitting my pen
every day.
6 times a day.
Yeah.
And so there's just a lot of variables in there, but unfortunately there's really no way to predict who's going to be affected.
Got it. Now, does it seem, either anecdotally or with the studies that you've read, after a brain matures, say like after 25 years old, are you noticing any conversion of like a THC induced psychosis, or is this only happening to men that are still in this like malleable phase?
Oh yeah, no. Well, 2 things. Johnny's Ambassadors only focuses on youth because we are working on preventing young people from using it by teaching them the science. I mostly do school assemblies. That's what I do, is go to schools, talk to middle schools and high schoolers about how their brain is forming and teaching them, hey, your brain is still forming. Young women is 25, but we actually know, John, young men is 28 to 30.
Wow.
And,
So I'm still
relatively new science, 2019 or so. So by showing them MRIs, PET scans, brain formation, changes in prefrontal cortex, I mean, we don't be like, don't do drugs, drugs are bad. You actually want to show them why the brain is changing, how THC makes you high, what it does when it binds to the receptors, what are the outcomes. But then we tell them, and it is not guaranteed to be harmless for anyone. So what we're trying to say is, look, it's more important while your brain is forming, you don't use it. My brain is formed, your brain is formed, if we use it, it's not going to have as many harms as if you're 15. And I have known plenty of adults. I have a friend, Heidi, who lets me share her story. She was 49 when she came to visit a friend of ours in Colorado, took 2 hits off her dab pen, and was hallucinating in a mental hospital for 2 weeks, thinking that the nurses were shapeshifters.
Right.
So there's no age that it's guaranteed to be harmless. And yes, adults have problems. Elderly have problems. We're seeing a lot more elderly psychosis.
But I get
we're seeing before.
That's insane.
It's more harmful for you.
And I would assume when you say more harmful, meaning like more permanent damage. Because again, I've experienced when I was younger, same thing. Like, marijuana just never sat well with me. There was like, it would be so hit or miss. Like sometimes I get a great high and it'd be casual. And then other times maybe something was too concentrated in THC and I'd be seeing shapes and I'd be like, I'm never going to get out of this high and I'm going to be permanently damaged. Yeah. And maybe it lasted.
And there's this transient where you can have those kind of temporary hallucinations,
right?
Temporary incidents where, the parents are like, oh my gosh, and they take them to the emergency room.
Right.
And if that's the last time they do it, most of the time they can recover from that. Unfortunately, what a lot of people don't recognize is when that happens to you, that you are like allergic to THC. Like you're demonstrating that your mind has the ability to be in psychosis. And what we call that, John, is first episode psychosis. What you experienced is psychosis. And fortunately for you, you went, holy cow, that sucks. That's awful. That's horrible. I'm never going to do that again. But sadly, many people do. Many young people do it again, do it again, do it again. And that's where you start seeing that brain not being able to come back to baseline.
I think it becomes almost like this game with yourself. Like, I have to beat this. I have to be able to smoke my way out. It's like a mental game, right? I didn't have the mental toughness to handle it, but now if I keep smoking, I will one day. And then you keep chasing this carrot in front of your face, and it leads to some terrible things. It's just, I mean, I think the biggest and most important thing that you're trying to get across to the youth is like, it's not necessarily black and white. It's not like either you can smoke weed and be happy and casual, or you have this induced psychosis. It could be very gradual, or it could be just impact you.
For Johnny.
Exactly. It's not going to happen overnight, and it could just be impacting you in a weird way that you think is normal, and it's truly not normal. I want to talk about, and we mentioned it briefly in the beginning, the concentration of THC, what people are smoking now. Does it seem like that's the reason why people are going into this psychosis, is just the concentration?
Well, the brain was not intended to handle the doses that the kids are using. And they don't calculate serving size. It's not like they're looking at the package, on the cart they just bought and calculating, how much they should use. It's so different from when I was a teen smoking, back in the 80s. I'm dating myself now, but I was 55 and I'm 55 now. I had a buddy, Jim, at 17, who was growing weed in his basement. We would go over and smoke. And when I was using it in the 80s, it was like 2% THC. When Johnny was born in 2000, it was 5% THC. Today, the average weed is 20% in dispensaries, but there are 35 and 40% strains of THC. So at 2%, if I smoked a joint, At 17 years old, it was 5 milligrams roughly. Today, if you smoke a joint at 20%, right, a half gram, it's 100 milligrams. If you smoke at 30%, it's 300, right? If you look at the carts and the dabs, if you buy a 1 gram cart of an 80% THC oil, right, there's 800 milligrams in that cart instead of 5 in an old-fashioned joint. And some of those teens will go through a cart a day.
Yeah.
A day. And if you use wax, that was Johnny's drug of choice. You know, he was always eating his pen. You know, you can have 100, 250, 350 milligrams in a dab versus 5, right? Wham! Into those receptors. And what happens is because THC has an affinity for the CB1 receptor, it binds to it and downscales your natural production of your own natural neurotransmitters called anandamide, not really important, but basically your own feel-good chemicals can't be produced.
Right, and that makes sense.
The receptors are blocked. They start shutting down. They're like, whoa, way too much, because they don't know that THC is not anandamide. And basically now you must use THC just to feel normal. So before, we didn't put so much in our brains and it didn't block so many receptors and it wasn't causing as many problems. But now with the high potency, with the accessibility, with the very early age of onset, with how frequently these teens are hitting these vapes and eating these edibles and doing these dabs, that is a very deadly combination.
Yeah.
All of those factors.
Right. Is it just the amount of THC, or does it have to do, and we may not have this information yet, the ratio of THC to CBD? Because I know a lot of these things are stripped from everything but the THC. Could that be coming in? Could that be a factor?
There used to be a theory that CBD would kind of offset the THC, that it was somehow a protective factor in the plant. And now we're just seeing that, I mean, the CBD levels haven't changed at all since the 60s. I mean, there's very little CBD in natural THC.
Right.
But it's just that people who smoke, you know, try to put more CBD in with less THC. We're not seeing anything really above THC medically. Doctors consider high potency, and pretty much all weed is over 10% potency. As of 2013, you couldn't find weed under 10%. Like Jim's basement weed doesn't grow anymore. It's been completely modified out of existence, you know, a genetically modified organism. I think the people who were voting for legalized weed in Colorado back in 2012 kind of wanted that love and peace, giggle, go to Denny's kind of feeling, right? And that's what I think everybody was voting for.
Right.
Thinking, oh, you know, that's harmless.
Bad.
But now it's not harmless anymore.
Yeah.
With these crazy potent products that are off the charts, wreaking havoc with our kids' brains, sadly.
Got it. So they're really just focusing on these THC levels. It's not like a net neutral thing where if you have 100 mgs of THC, but it's okay if you have 100 milligrams of CBD to couple it and help negate any sort of... No, it doesn't have
anything to do with it. It's THC is THC is THC.
Right.
It's getting THC into the brain. The CBD doesn't like offset it or neutralize it. CBD doesn't even bind to the same receptor THC binds to.
Right. Because I know, and maybe this is like anecdotally, I've been around people that say, like, if you're having a crazy high and you want to help diminish some of these symptoms, try to take some CBD and it may calm you down in a sense, but maybe it's just not impacting the brain still.
No,
I'm not sure.
There is no evidence of that. There is no proof of that. The FDA warns against CBD. It causes liver toxicity. There's a black box warning on it. Pure pharmaceutical grade CBD, which is called Epidiolex, that you can get for prescription for rare seizure disorders, has a black box warning for suicide. My son was smoking pure CBD distillate, thinking it was going to help him. And there was some on his counter, even the night he died, that we went back to his apartment. So no, there's zero proof of any of that. And I definitely don't recommend using CBD either. buyer beware kind of thing.
Well, then let's flip that kind of question. Let's strip the THC and talk to the people that think, I don't smoke THC, I smoke CBD. Are you noticing the same risks with this like induced psychosis just from CBD?
No, because CBD, well, yeah, no, and when CBD is heated, the research shows the CBD can convert to THC under extremely high temperatures.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm happy to send you links for anything.
Yeah.
But in the vape pens and the coils that burn at hundreds of degrees, molecularly, it can change. You know, all you have to do is you're moving a double bind and scooching over a carbon molecule and closing a chain, and boom, you've got, I mean, that's how they're converting things like hemp, you know, Delta-8. You just take CBD from hemp and you close a carbon chain and move a double bind and you've got Delta-8, right? So all these things can be changed using solvents, using heat in labs, propane, ethanol, butane, all these things can be changed. So CBD can convert to THC. So when you're dabbing CBD, like in a nectar collector or something under very high heat with butane, you've got THC. So there's no evidence, and there are 0 dispensary products that are approved for any medicinal use by the FDA in the dispensary. 0. There are a few that you can get with a prescription in a pharmacy, but there are no dispensary products, whether they're CBD or THC based, that are proven to be safe. In fact, I mean, there's no scientific evidence that cannabis is in any way beneficial for the treatment of any psychiatric disorder. The evidence we're seeing in contrast is that it leads to the onset of these mental illnesses, depression, psychosis, anxiety, bipolar 1 with psychotic features, schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia. And sadly, adolescents are at greatest risk because of the great neurological, changes that they're experiencing at that age.
Now, what is Delta-8 and Delta-9? Like, what is the major differences between that and the weed that like you mentioned, your buddy Jim was growing?
Well, no, so weed has Delta-8 and Delta-9 in it. Weed has over 80 different cannabinoids. So Delta-9, THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, is one out of 80, 100 or so different cannabinoids that can all be found in trace amounts in natural marijuana. So you can find Delta-8 THC in marijuana, but it's very, very small amounts. And so it's not financially feasible to extract enough Delta-8 from natural marijuana to make these products. So when the Farm Bill legalized hemp, right, less than 0.3% THC qualifies it as hemp. Delta-9, which is in marijuana, means it's hemp. But they forgot to sort of put in a rule that you couldn't make intoxicating derivatives out of these products. So some really smart scientists learned that you could take the CBD out of hemp and extract it, and in a lab, you can convert that molecule to Delta-8 THC, which now is psychoactive. But it's made from hemp. So there's a loophole that, we need to clean up the language of the Farm Bill, saying that you cannot make intoxicating products chemically in a lab by converting hemp into different products.
Are you noted? Yeah. Okay. So that's it's like a legal hack of the system type of thing to get these. Yeah. Okay. Now, are you noticing more psychosis cases with the synthetic marijuana, or it's coming from kind of both sides of it?
Well, I mean, THC is THC, right? Delta-8 THC, they all bind to the same receptor. It all is, I mean, the real challenge with a lot of this stuff, like wax, and whether it's marijuana or hemp, right? It's all done in a lab. And so you basically take the marijuana and you run butane through it, which breaks off the trichomes and makes the THC leave the plant. Well, you can't remove all of the solvents out of these products. In fact, the ingredients list on the back of these products will say things like, ethanol, butane used in extraction. So they're still in the products. They're still going into your brain. Wow. So it doesn't really matter whether these are marijuana, THC, Delta-9 products that you're using, or Delta-8, hemp-derived CBD converted products that you're using. They're all done through unnatural chemical processes, which leave a ton of byproducts in your brain. And that's all. So maybe all these chemicals that are being used to produce all of these various products are also
impacting something,
causing a lot of these problems. So it doesn't really matter if it's like synthetic. Some people say Delta-8 is like light, weed light, like it's a third as strong. Well, but then they just use 3 times as much. So
right. Is it really that light?
Yeah.
I mean, because I remember when I was growing up, when I was like 15 or whatever, there was something called, I think it was called K1. And
yeah, that's a full bind. That's like spice.
K2.
Right. That's
K1,
lab derived 100. That is the THC molecule. Normally THC and anandamide are a partial bind. The bottom of the THC molecule and the bottom of the anandamide molecule are the only parts that are the same. Mm-hmm. The tops are different. So it's called a partial agonist naturally. But in a lab, you can make K1 or spice, which is a full bind. They're replicating the molecule anandamide in the brain identically. And that is a full bind.
Got it.
That is actually lethal, quite toxic. It's not just kind of sort of fitting into the receptor.
Yeah, because I remember, we had like a couple guys, like it was a rumor, they smoked this K1 stuff or K2 stuff and they're going crazy. And you're 14, you didn't know what crazy actually meant. It was probably, but they're like, don't worry, we're good with the natural stuff. We'll be okay because we smoke this and not that. And I just am, again, so curious about.
Yeah, even, kids say that, Miss Stack, I don't do that dab stuff.
Right, I only smoke the natural.
And I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? All weed is potent now. There is no more Jim's Basement weed. You can't buy weed that isn't high potency. Mm-hmm. It is all high potency. There is nothing natural about today's weed. It is all a GMO, genetically modified organism. Yeah, maybe if we could go back to, the 1960s where people were smoking a 1% joint at Woodstock, where this whole reefer madness started, and maybe you smoke it once a month. All right.
I guess.
But that's not what they're doing.
And again, we're not advocating for anybody to smoke, but hypothetically, if you could go back in time and keep these THC levels extremely low, are you noticing that seems to be okay in general for everybody? I don't know,
because I've never seen anything with low THC levels.
Nowadays, it seems like everything is at least way higher.
You can't buy anything with low THC levels.
Right, which is insane to me and again, maybe it's because people aren't as aware as you and I about what's going on. And I wonder if in 5-10 years, even these dispensaries are like, hey, this is way too dangerous for people. We have to start selling stuff that is at 1-2% THC.
Oh, I don't know if that'll ever happen, but I mean, our dispensaries, we've closed down 50% of them for medical marijuana sales. Oh my gosh, it's tanking.
Why is that?
In Colorado. Well, a lot of it is regulation. We helped pass 1317 in Colorado in 2021, regulating marijuana concentrates. So now for 18 to 20-year-olds, you have to have 2 doctors who independently confirm you have a chronic and debilitating condition. They have to pull your mental health records, your other anyway. So instead of 6,000 18-year-olds with med cards, now we have under 1,000 because it's a hoax. It's a farce. It's not medical at all. There's nothing wrong with them. They go, I got a headache. You need a med card. So now with more strict criteria, we have put guardrails in place and the medical has plummeted. So it does work, to protect young people. We were hoping we'd see a lot more states follow Colorado's lead. You know, we were the first one to legalize it and the first one to go, whoa, this is really impacting our young people, but we haven't seen as many take up that mantle. So no, we've had a huge decline in Colorado. I like to think it's education. You know, we do a lot of educating in Colorado. There's a lot of PSAs and media and a lot of campaigns trying to educate our teens, but a lot of it is just legislation and the changes that have occurred over the years. I don't think it's going to go, I don't think we're going to repeal it. I don't think the horse will go back in the barn. But we're seeing a lot fewer doctors willing to put their names on this stuff because they realize it's not medicine.
That's why it's so important for you know, people like you out there that are just raising awareness. Like, look, you're, like you said, you're acknowledging and you're aware it's probably not going to get repealed, but at least some sort of regulation on the amount of THC in this stuff is hugely important.
Yeah, I just don't think it's ever going to happen.
It's kind of hard to bring it back to where it once
industry,
was.
You know, we tried to put a cap on THC. There's only one state out of 50 that even has any kind of cap. And it's like 30% flower, 60% concentrate. It's like nothing. It's like,
jeez.
But you know, any cap, it's amazing that it's even legal. It's like the wild, wild west. I mean, the difference is like me drinking a Coors Light once a month versus someone drinking a fifth of Everclear every day, right? I mean, that's the difference in what was and what is.
Yeah.
And the teen brain just can't handle that.
Yeah. And I guess it is this whole progression of just like having something in the market for long enough, you know, like liquor nowadays is so regulated because it's been around for so long. Like marijuana's only been legal for how many years? 15 years, if that, 12 years.
Well, yeah, I mean, 2012, we were the first state,
right.
You know, 17 years. I mean, it is the Wild West out there still. And, you know, at some point, maybe they'll come in and, you know, and the FDA will say nothing over 10%. And boy, that's going to put a lot of people out of business. And the marijuana industry just has a baby when you know, try to put any kind of cap. Oh, wipe out the whole industry. Okay, well,
good.
You know, maybe that's a good thing if people go back to, you know, growing the Woodstock plants, but it just doesn't exist anymore.
Doesn't seem like you see a path to that. What is a reason that these doctors, because I know it's getting way more strict now, to give medical cards out? What would be a legitimate reason they're giving a medical card to somebody?
Oh, there are very few. You know, it's counterindicated for anxiety, for depression, you know, for any psychological issue. Some rare seizure disorders in children, you know, Gestalt syndrome. There are AIDS, wasting syndrome.
Okay.
There are some neurological conditions. The CB1 receptor controls the nervous system in the endocannabinoid system. And so very rare, like neuropathy, pain, for example, multiple sclerosis, and like severe like diabetes with the, you know, horrible pain in the nerves in the feet. I mean, that's it. There's very, very few things that are actually FDA approved for THC derived medicine. I'm talking that is written by a doctor. You go to Walgreens and you pick it up at the pharmacy, right? And it's in a pill, Dronabinol or Epidiolex or Marinol, you know, and it's 2.5 milligrams of THC.
Right.
Sesame oil, right? And you take a dab and it's 250 milligrams.
It's very, so, like you said, it's very different.
Okay.
There
are no studies, zero, that show there are any benefits to teens from using these high potency dispensary products. Zero.
Yeah. That's the focus, is the high potency. Again, you taking a 5 milligram gummy is very different than somebody smoking. And now does it seem like the people that are, that you're dealing with, are they smoking it normally, or are people that are taking gummies still experiencing this?
Well, again, THC is THC. Right. Doesn't matter the route.
Okay.
Edibles have THC. Vapes have THC. Dabs have THC. Smokes have THC. The route doesn't matter. It has to do with, I mean, teens aren't stupid enough really to smoke weed because you can smell it.
Right, exactly.
And so you could get caught with it. you know, but they make Rob Hots gummies that are 50 milligrams of THC each.
Yeah.
Right. One serving is 10 milligrams legally, but you know, they'll take a Rob Hot 50 milligrams. They just took 5 servings and they have no concept, right? Because after they eat it, nothing happens because it takes like 30 to 60 minutes for it to work. And then they go, oh, I guess I got a bad one. And they eat another one.
Yep.
Right. And then bam, they are in the emergency room having a huge reaction. And people don't understand that you can overdose on these products. Every single school I talk to, when I do assemblies, I'll talk to a counselor or a school nurse or a principal, you know, who tells me about these kids taking these edibles and they are holding them in their arms, waiting for the ambulance to arrive, literally thinking they are going to die. If you have never seen anyone have an overdose on THC, it is very scary.
Yeah, it looks like any other overdose. You know, it's a very scary.
They're like, oh my god, they did, you know, fentanyl. They're trying to Narcan them, you know, and
yeah,
it doesn't work, of course. And sometimes they randomly come to and they go, oh, it must have been laced with something. I'm like, yeah,
with more THC. Exactly. Is there anything that does seem to calm down an overdose or somebody that's in an extreme state?
No, it just has to work its way out of the body. Unfortunately, a lot of kids are. There's been, they said, a 600% increase in calls to the Rocky Mountain Poison Control Center since marijuana was legalized in Colorado.
600?
Teens, I mean, little kids that are 6 years old, right? They can't read your gummy bear box that says, you know, 600 milligrams Delta-9 you know, they eat the whole box and boom, now they can't breathe. They're in and out of consciousness. They're having, you know, acute psychotic episodes, violent thrashing, have to be, you know, on a ventilator. I mean, horrible outcomes from these. These edibles are really, really dangerous. And they're very popular because they're not easy to detect. And, you know, even the vapes, I would say, are more popular just because they're very discreet. They're very small. You know, you can hold vape in your lungs until it dissipates, and then you're not even blowing anything out. I mean, you can vape and people don't even notice. I mean, the teens tell me all about this, and they more use the vapes, I would say, than the smoke.
Yeah. I mean, I notice it now too in like the liquor stores, you know, like the hottest products now aren't the hard seltzers anymore. It's the THC products. And like you mentioned, the lethal dosages, I can get a can downstairs with 50 milligrams of THC in it, you know, and it's for the price of right. What? Yeah, exactly.
Because you can make that from hemp. Right. Yep. I mean, 0.3% THC when you add it to liquid, right? And now 1,000, you know, milliliters of that, you can have like 30 in there with Delta-9 and still be legal, you know? So it's crazy once you start adding it to drinks. They make drops that they put under their tongues. There's nasal sprays. I've seen inhalers, like where you can, you know, it's a blast is 100 milligrams of THC. I mean, eye drops, any orifice you can think of, they have figured out how to put THC in it. So the routes of administration are all different, but it's all the same molecule and it's all very high serving size.
These people that are experiencing the weed-induced psychosis, how often are they admitting and acknowledging that this was from the weed, one? And number two, how often are they even like recollecting what they were going through at the time?
Well, it depends because there's various levels. There are some people who have, you know, they'll take a dab or something really strong for the first time and they'll have an acute psychotic episode.
Yeah, that's right? Different, right?
And they'll end up in an emergency room and, you know, they'll be fine in 30 days. If those people who are having these very first episodes go, oh my gosh, it was from whatever it is I used, and they never use again, it's highly likely that they'll be okay. Mm-hmm. The challenge is the ones that we see do it again and do it again, and they're so slowly having effects of it,
right,
that they think their thinking is normal, that you're the one.
Yep.
Right? There's something wrong. And, you know, obviously this isn't hurting me. I've got straight A's because you can't see the changes and the pruning, the synaptic pruning happening behind the scenes. And then all of a sudden, right, it hits. It's not like it's acute for every person. Johnny smoked from the time he was 14. He didn't die till he was 19. And he didn't show any psychotic symptoms until he was 18. So
Wow.
it was 4 years after he started using, before he started going a little crazy in the head from it. And it was so gradual, he didn't notice it. And, you know, he had to really be counseled that it was the weed. And then they put him on a bit of an antipsychotic for a while, which helped. And he was like, it snapped him out of it. And then when he stopped smoking, he would be normal again. And then he would tell us, okay, that was a little embarrassing. I guess the mob really isn't after me. So he would have these moments of clarity. Yes.
Okay.
But then when he started using again, he would lose his mind again.
Even
and it was just this cycle.
When he
so
was,
it really depends on the person. It's very different in many of the cases. And sometimes it takes 9 months, 12 months of
no smoking,
sobriety before some of these young people's return to baseline. And sadly, some of them never do. Some of them are on medicine for the rest of their lives.
Did you notice that Johnny, when he was smoking but taking the antipsychotics, he was normal or no? Like the antipsychotics?
Oh yeah. Yeah, he would kind of come back. You know, he would seem to be okay again when he was on the medication. But then when he would stop taking it, that psychosis would kind of come back if he just stopped cold turkey, which he did once.
Stop the smoking or the antipsychotics?
Well, both.
Okay,
when
so
he was in the mental hospital, he was forced sober.
Right.
Right. So you couldn't. So it takes 3 to 4 weeks to get THC out of your system.
Mm-hmm.
And the withdrawal effects are so bad that he just had a hard time stopping. But when he would be in the hospital, he would have to stop. And then like 4 weeks later, when it would leave his system, he would kind of come to again. But the medication also would help tamp that down a bit. But there were a couple times where he was still using and on the antipsychotic, which now you can't tell what's going on. You know, I don't know if the medicine is working. I mean, the reality is that anybody who has any kind of reaction, even where they feel a little suspicious or a little paranoid, they must be sober from THC.
Was he reluctant to take the antipsychotics when he was sober from THC?
Yeah, I mean, he knew at that he would have these moments of clarity where he would recognize that his brain was not right. You know, he even told me that, like I explained in the story. And so he would take one medication, but then he was allergic to it. And then they'd try him on something else, and that would make his eye twitch. And then, you know, they would try him on something else, and that would seem to work. But then he would be like, I don't want to take medicine for the rest of my life. And he would just stop taking it abruptly, right? And you can't do that. You have to, they slowly wean these young people off of the antipsychotic that helps them get out of that psychotic episode. And they want to slowly wean them off. It's like an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety. You can't just stop taking it. Right.
Yeah. So, but these kids don't know that. You know, they think I'm cold turkey and I'm going to be fine.
I'm better. Oh, it worked.
Yeah.
You know, and they don't, I mean, their brains are broken anyway. And they don't understand the process of titrating from that.
Of course not. Yeah. And it seems like it would almost revert. It would almost like have like a slingshot effect of, okay, I'm cutting cold turkey and now here's a psychotic episode because now the brain is so out of whack, you know?
Right. Oh yeah. And sometimes even in cessation when they were using and now they stop, they can have these acute psychotic episodes that now they have to come out of.
How was Johnny's sleep? Was he sleeping at all?
Oh, horrible.
Right.
This is one of the things we hear from teens all the time. When especially if they're on it, like, oh, I take a gummy, every night to help me sleep. It's like, really, studies counter indicate THC for sleep. And I can show you sleep models and waves of sleeping that show how disrupted it is. You can't get into REM sleep. It's horrible for sleep. And actually, when you try to stop using weed, you get horrible insomnia.
Right.
And so a lot of Johnny was like, he was a terrible sleeper. He was either not sleeping at all or he was oversleeping because he was so exhausted because he could never really get good sleep.
Right.
No, and it was hard because, as a parent, you're like, well, teen boys have a hard time with sleep anyway. And, it's really hard to understand what is the drug and what is kind of normal teen behavior, so to speak.
Right. And I mean, take everything else out of the equation and just focus in on the sleep, how important sleep is for brain development. Now you have these young teens that are going.
It's everything. It's heart issues.
Right.
It's
exactly.
lung issues. It's the sleep. It's IQ. We know they lose 6 to 8 IQ points, which is like going from an A to a C.
That's a big deal.
I mean, there are so many harms that we focus on. And I think that's really got to be the thing, not to be lecturing that. I mean, understanding why they're using it and, that it's hard. It's hard to be the one that's not using what all your friends around you are using. And it's hard to convince a teen about the long term. I want you to think of yourself when you're 25. It's really hard to do for them to kind of project themselves out like that.
Yeah.
Because they're so in the moment.
And it's one of those things that, again, you're told it's not a drug, it's natural, this is fine, you can smoke. And I'm assuming there's like a little bit of like an embarrassment, like all my friends can smoke weed, but I can't.
Yeah, why can't I? Why am I having these weird effects? And then there's that one person who uses it more and more and more and more and more. And now all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, don't talk to Johnny. He's weird, And
that's exactly. Yeah. And you're at the age where kids are ruthless. They're not sympathizing with you. They're just going to stop hanging out with you. And now you're the weird kid and now you have no relationships.
Now you're the weird one that can't handle it. And again, we don't know who that's going to happen to. And I mean, in Colorado, 1 out of every 10 8th grader is addicted, 2 out of every 10 10th grader, and 3.5, I don't know how you can have 3.5 kids out of 10 seniors are using. And so we try to explain to teens that means most people are not using, right? So it's
good
not
point.
True that everyone is using. It is more common not to use, but you just feel like it's everywhere and that everyone's doing it. And really trying to show the facts. Here's the data. Here's the research. Here and because they're going to do what they're going to do. Really, I mean, I told Johnny I was going to duct tape him to a wall, chain him to a radiator. I mean, but I wanted him to go to school.
Yeah.
And you want them to have this information because they need to be able to make good decisions. And we're just hoping that by teaching the parents, really trying to raise awareness, sounding the alarm. We have a documentary coming out with Johnny's Ambassadors with 3 parent-teen stories with some doctors about their cannabis-induced psychosis and how they came out the other side and how they're okay now. So we're hoping the documentary gets a lot of traction, and that's debuting next week. So we're really excited. Cannabis-Induced Psychosis, a silent epidemic. And I'll make sure to send you a link.
Please do, because I'd love to.
As well.
And I'll make sure we promote that. And again, for me, with my experience, I think the best thing, if I could help anybody during it, it's like, don't ignore what is very clearly a sign, right? Like we would make so many excuses for this individual to be like, oh, maybe that was a little bit weird. And he did that one thing and all right, he'll be fine. And then a couple of days go by. No, it's getting a little bit weirder, but okay, that's fine. And then you look back, you're like, how did we ignore what was going on?
Yeah.
How did we miss this? And so I think people out there, this is a very real thing. Don't ignore what's very abnormal and help these people when it's a little bit easier for them to get help in the early stages before. And like you said, unfortunately, it is too late and some people will never kind of recover. But I think the silver lining here is that raising more awareness is going to help way more people.
It will, and it does. I mean, I know every time I talk to hundreds, thousands of kids in an assembly, I know, even if 5% of them really heard and listened to that and let it sink in, they're going to make different choices. And I know it saves lives every time. And everybody listening to your show, someone's going to go and talk to their kid. Someone's going to go and tell a sibling about this, and it will save lives. And that's really what it's all about, is raising this awareness, making sure people are educated. This is not harmless. It is not a benign substance. It is not natural. This is not the same stuff. And that THC can induce mental illness and psychosis in young people, and to really be aware that cannabis-induced psychosis is real. It happened to my child. It happens to thousands of children. And we really need to make sure this isn't such a silent epidemic anymore.
Yeah. Well, listen, Laura, thank you again so much for sharing your story. I mean, I appreciate it. I'm sure you're helping way more people out there than you even realize. Where can they find you? And again, we'll do our part in promoting what you guys have going on with Johnny Ambassadors and, and elsewhere.
Thank you. Yes. Just visit us on the website, Johnny's with an S, ambassadors.org. They can email me, Laura@johnnysambassadors.org. I can plug them in. We have resources. We have support groups. We have treatment programs that are listed all over the United States so they can get help. So if anybody hearing this is concerned at all about their teens' THC use, their college-age students' THC use, please have them reach out to us and we'd be happy to support them.
Absolutely. Likewise. So thank you so much, Laura, again. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for having me, John. All right.